All right, and welcome to my channels, ladies. If this is your first time here, welcome. I am Jax and I make videos about my real life, and today my real life is about the cost of infertility. So we are going to be going through the cost of injectable cycles, hybrid cycles, testing, IVF, and IUIs. And I have left a handy little guide down below if you want to just skip to the part that you find relevant. You won't hurt my feelings at all. All that I ask is that you leave a big thumbs up on this video if you find it helpful. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to mention that all of the prices I talk about are sticker prices, and I'm going to show you over to my right, your left, actual cost sheets from my clinic. So you can see these are the sticker prices for these procedures, but you can always use the procedure codes listed to check with your insurance to see how much they would cost going through your insurance. So don't get too scared. If you have health insurance and health insurance that covers infertility, these prices won't be as high. All of these prices are in US dollars. If you're outside the US, you can either convert these numbers into your current currency, or you can use them to gauge whether or not seeking treatment in the US would be cheaper or more expensive than seeking treatment in your own country. First things first, when you get diagnosed with infertility, you need to get diagnosed. So lots of testing happens. This is checking for you and your partner to see what is wrong. You should expect these to run you about $1,000 to $3,000 depending on who you start with. If you start with your OB, the cost is probably going to be less because insurance is more likely to cover them, and also your OB isn't going to go as in-depth as an RE would. That's reproductive endocrinologist. Most people start with their OBs, doing some basic testing, and then switch to their REs. If you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I'm a huge advocate for moving on to an RE as soon as you know there's an actual infertility problem. OBs are wonderful at making sure you're healthy for the majority of your life and for making sure you're healthy during a pregnancy, but they are not equipped with the training to help you try to conceive. That's what a reproductive endocrinologist is for, and I highly recommend pursuing their treatment before you go down a rabbit hole with your OB. Basic diagnostic treatments, these include saline sonograms, the injection for the saline sonogram, complete semen analysis. Those type of things are going to be pretty standard routine that are going to happen. There's also going to be quite a bit of blood work and possibly some genetic tests. The genetic testing can be very expensive, upwards of like $20,000, but your RE's clinic will likely have a deal with these companies, so the cost is much less, in the $100 to $200 range. They probably will submit it to your insurance, but if the bill comes back higher than the clinic's deal, you just contact the clinic's billing department, say, hey, I got this bill, and they will take care of it and talk with that company to get their clinic's price. Here's the next price sheet. And this is for oral medication cycles, hybrid cycles, and injectable cycles. I go into a little bit more depth about what those are in a different video about treating PCOS, so I'm not going to get into that very deep. All you need to know for now is that in descending order, they get more invasive and more expensive. These are going to be the prices for every single round you want to try, and most couples will go through at least 6 rounds before deciding to move on to something else. That's 6 rounds without any successful pregnancies. Then you usually get the signal to move on. If you need a donor specimen, that's additional, and they have to receive it and store it, and so those are additional costs if you're using donor sperm. Up at the top of this price sheet, you'll see the cost for the monitoring ultrasounds. Those are what you're going to have done every other day if you are doing injectables to make sure that your ovaries aren't overstimulating. So like it says, you're probably going to do 2 to 3 of those per cycle. And then if you're doing an IUI, then you have to have the insemination fee. The next thing that you need to know the cost of is IVF. IVF prices vary from clinic to clinic, and it depends on what policies they have. Most clinics offer just a straight up price. This is the price to go through a full stimulation and egg retrieval and transfers. Some clinics offer kind of insurance policies where you'll pay a higher price, but if they fail, you'll get some of your money back. Or you may pay a higher price and they're willing to do 1 to 3 cycles depending on if any work. So that's more of a gamble where if it works in the first cycle, well, you're out the money, but at least you could have had those other 2 cycles if those had failed. You definitely want to shop around when you're choosing your IVF clinic. You definitely want to look at their stats, talk to their doctors. Don't go off stats alone, because some clinics cherry pick which patients they take to make their stats look better. So you might talk to a clinic with great stats, but they don't treat anyone over 35. Well, of course your success rates are going to be better when you're dealing with younger mothers. So make sure you talk to the doctors, get a good feel, decide what you want. Me personally, I like a much more scientific approach to my treatment. I don't need a lot of that cuddles and feels from my doctor. I want them to kind of give it to me straight. So choose interview and choose doctors. Don't be afraid to switch too. I think a lot of people don't self-advocate enough, and they're scared to like break up with their doctor, but it happens all the time. And as long as you do it in a respectful manner, they don't super care. It happens a lot. Here's just one example of an IVF cost. The base cost at my clinic is $12,000. You can see this includes all of the monitoring, all the nurses' checkups, the retrieval, and transfers, as well as the embryo storage fees for up to a year. What that cost doesn't cover is medications, which are going to run you $3,000 to $8,000 depending on how much you need and which doses you're on. Unfortunately, IVF is kind of a game of trial and error, and some people are going to be on just 2 or 3 medications, and some people are going to be up to 5 to 6 different types of medications, and that cost just varies. So I always tell people to oversave, because the worst thing that could happen is you get to the middle of a cycle, need to order another $600 Gonal-F pen, and you can't afford it. And then you've just sabotaged your whole cycle. Other optional costs are pre-genetic screenings. Essentially, this process involves waiting till your embryos get to day 5, taking one of the cells out and sending them for genetic testing. It is a costly procedure, as you can see, if you don't have benefits that cover it. And some people have moral convictions against it. I won't get into that here, but it can be very helpful in increasing your success rates with IVF. And then, of course, there's an ongoing cost. If you have surviving embryos, you do have to pay the storage fee every year for those. Other miscellaneous costs that you might want to consider while you're pursuing fertility treatments are second opinions, doubling up on tests. If you go through this long enough, then you may need another sperm analysis. Another thing to consider is miscarriage costs. 1 in 4 women experience a miscarriage, and just because you had to try so much harder to get here through fertility treatments does not exempt you from having to go through that. Obviously, if you miscarry naturally, then you just have a very cheap follow-up appointment, but you may have to pay for medications to induce the miscarriage, and then that only works 90% of the time, and then you have to go get a D&C. Or if you're like me, you chose to get a D&C right off the bat, but that is a surgical operation and has a price tag of $10,000 to $15,000 if not covered by insurance. It is most likely that your insurance will cover that above all the other things that I've talked about. Weigh that in your options and kind of know what you want to do ahead of time. If you're ever faced with that situation, in the moment is not usually the best time to make that kind of decision. My only other piece of advice is just to remember that these are all medical procedures, and you can see they all have procedure codes. You can always check ahead of time to see what's going to get denied and approved by your insurance companies. Most of the customer service reps, at least that I have talked to, have been very helpful, and the process is very expedited. If you have the procedure codes, go ahead, ask your clinic for that. If you usually any treatments you go and have done at your OB will be covered by insurance since they're coming from the OB's office. That is why some people choose to stay away from the RE as long as possible. Definitely something that's very valid and that you need to consider. All right, ladies, that's all I have for you today. If you found any of this helpful, please hit that like button. And if you'd like to follow my own pregnancy journey and infertility journey, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, ladies, keep on fighting.